Right guys, I'll just quickly sort the camera out here, that's it. Anyway, so in the last episode of the Revisiting SAFC Managers series, obviously we did Gus Poyet, which granted was quite long. This one's probably going to be a little bit shorter, because like Paulo Di Canio, Dick Advocaat was only here for probably over a dozen games. Maybe a little bit longer than that, to be fair, 15 to 20 matches, but either way, I'll save my opinions on Advocaat towards the end. So in March 2015, Gus Poyet left the club, and Dick Advocaat came in. Some people were actually fairly excited by this appointment because of what he supposedly achieved. Going abroad, leaving. It was quite separate from England, to be honest. But anyway, I'm rambling on. Again, the next manager to lose his first game, which was a 1-0 defeat away at West Ham, and then beat Newcastle in his second game. And one of the things I will thank Dick Advocaat for is that game, mainly, but this is more down to Jermaine Defoe, because Jermaine Defoe scored the best goal I've witnessed live at the Stadium of Light. And it's not just that it's against Newcastle. If that was against anyone, I would have said that goal, because that was just an incredible experience. And you could tell when he was starting to cry, you could tell some players get it. And I know that sounds very cliche, but some players actually do just get it. And Jermaine Defoe was among that list. And it was something special to see. After that, we kind of started a bit more. We lost 4-1 at home to Palace. Then we drew 1-1 at Stoke before beating Southampton and Everton 2-1 and 2-0 respectively. And I will give Advocaat this as well. We saw a historic moment. Danny Graham scored a Sunderland goal, especially in the Premier League, which was incredible. That Everton result was the one that really kept us up that season. And to be honest, that team we had that season probably should have gone down, because that team really had barely any creativity, barely anything in it. But in saying that, we got those results, and then we drew 0-0 at home to Leicester, which is disappointing, really. But at the same time, they were one of the form teams in the league. And we followed that up by securing safety with a 0-0 draw at the Emirates. Obviously, we lost 3-1 to Chelsea. Stephen Fletcher put us 1-0 up, and then Chelsea came from behind to beat us to lift the title on the last day, even though the titles were before then. But that game really didn't mean anything. Now, this is kind of where things really... Again, this is a similar pattern here. Things started to unravel. When Advocaat left the club, there was a clamouring from Sunderland fans to bring him back. I personally wasn't a part of that. But and I'm not having a go at people who were, by the way. If they wanted him back, more than fair enough. Down to opinions and prerogatives. And of course he did come back, but it was come back on the promise of investment. Bear in mind, we did sign Jeremy Lenz, we signed Yunus Kabul, we signed Jan Villa, we re-signed Fabio Barini, even though the reports that Advocaat didn't want Barini. And we were linked with Adnan Januzaj, who we would sign just over a year later, funnily enough. But for this one, Advocaat was kind of moaning, especially towards the end of his tenure, about the fact that he wasn't properly backed. And this seems to be a common theme throughout managers from Ellis Short's reign. Now, I'd recommend you go and watch SCFC Fan TV, the stream from last week, because there was obviously a debate of that. Obviously, we answered the questions that should have been asked a week ago, but weren't able to because of streaming and sound difficulties. We asked about who people thought did a better job, Ellis Short or Stuart Donald. I've obviously said Stuart Donald, and I still kind of do believe that by default, just because he gave me a reason to fall back in love with Sunderland again. I'm not going to get into that too much here, but the point was Ellis Short was... people constantly said Ellis Short didn't back them. Now, I do agree with Sean on one point that Short was restricted by financial fair play. And really, we shouldn't have had to have paid Jack Rodwell 60, 70 grand a week to come up here. Let's be real. Sunderland shouldn't be viewed that way from a lot of people. Yes, I know they are, but they shouldn't be. Anyway, but as far as the football went, we started with a 4-2 defeat away at Leicester. Now, bearing in mind, although Leicester did win the league, at the time, the first game, they weren't expected to do that. They were expected to struggle. Obviously, they did one of the greatest achievements in football after that. Norwich lost 3-1 at home to them. Drew 1-1 and 2-2 with Swansea and Villa, respectively. Home and Swansea and home, Villa away. Lost to Tottenham and Manchester United, even though I didn't expect anything from either of those games. And then we lost 2-0 pathetically to Bournemouth, although that was before Man United. I'm rumbling on here. And his final game was a 2-2 draw at home to West Ham after we went 2-0 up and just didn't bother to defend, basically. Look, for me, I've said this about Martin O'Neill, and I'm actually going to say this about Dick Advocaat. I felt Dick Advocaat was heavily overrated. I think that people kept saying, "Oh, look how great he was. Look at what he did, though." Oh, but if he'd done this, well, no. Advocaat, I think, did well to keep us up the end of the 14-15 season, but it's the same with every manager. Every manager did exactly the same thing, kept us up, and then struggled afterwards. And even with then, the biggest thing that turned... Advocaat's start in the 15-16 season before Allardyce came in was 3 points out of 8 games. Now, that for me is not good enough. But if Sunderland had had Man United, Man City, Leicester, Everton, Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, Liverpool, if those had been our first 8 games, I'd have said fair enough. You couldn't really have asked for much more than that. But when you had, right, Leicester again, although they won the league, at the time they weren't expected to. When we played them at the King Power, they were expected for a season of struggle, or at least not do much better, at best, not do much better than what they did the previous season when they needed a great escape to stay up. I'm not knocking Leicester, by the way, but I'm just making a point. Lost away to Leicester. You lost at home to Norwich, who didn't finish in the top 2 of the Championship. Again, Norwich deserved to beat us that day. I'm not disputing that. But at home, come on, really? Give over. Drew at home to Swansea at the time was an okay result, even though I did think Sunderland should be competing where Swansea were. Drew away at Aston Villa, although that's at the start of the season, but Villa, of course, went on to get relegated, so I know I've contradicted myself with the Leicester and Villa thing there, but make of that what you will. Lost away to Bournemouth, again, it was their first season in the Premier League, as in since it was dubbed the Premier League, and then drew 2-2 at home to West Ham when we were 2-0 up. And the biggest thing for me was people saying Advocaat left once he realised, okay, he's not going to work, or left because he didn't get backed. Well then, why wait until early October to do it then, mate? Why didn't you just do that as soon as the window finished? You could have at least given Allardyce the extra few games and we could have got a few more points and stayed up more comfortably. But at the end of the day, look, I didn't rate him, and I felt Advocaat left the instant things got tough. I really did. I felt Advocaat had the fixtures there to get it. Like, let's go through the first 8 games one more time before I wrap this up. Leicester away, Norwich at home, Swansea at home, Villa away, what was the next one? Tottenham at home, Bournemouth away, Man United away, West Ham at home. Now, really out of that lot, I'd expect at least 10 to 12 points. I'd expect at least 2 or 3 wins and a few draws there. And we got a couple of draws, but we didn't get any wins, which wasn't good enough. And even when it was blatantly clear, Advocaat was trying to set us up to play the way he wanted to play, like really open, really expansive, really attacking, and he could tell that the players weren't good enough to do that. You could tell they weren't, but he did nothing to try and change it. He did absolutely nothing to fix it and didn't adapt tactically to what he was doing. Our players looked clueless. I think there was a few of them that weren't trying hard enough. And if it weren't for Advocaat going, we definitely would have got relegated that season. I think Advocaat was absolutely hopeless in my opinion. Look, that's my minority opinion. Feel free to disagree with me, as I'm sure a few people will. But anyway, thanks again, as I said in the last video, thanks again to Wayside Life for the thumbnails. Go and subscribe and watch his content. And I'll see you next time for what is my favourite Sunderland manager.